Hi, I'm Kyle and welcome to Ask Your Elders. On today's episode, I interview Paul Quintana, an 85-year-old doctor who went on over 170 medical trips overseas to provide healthcare, particularly to children in parts of the world that otherwise wouldn't have care accessible. Paul shares his growing up both in Taos as well as Los Angeles, his journey through college, medical school, and of course his decades as a doctor, all while sharing life lessons and perspectives. I hope you enjoy the interview, and be sure to like and subscribe for future Ask Your Elders interviews.
My name is Paul Quintana. I'm a retired pediatrician, and I just had an 85th birthday.
Happy birthday. That's incredible.
Thank you. And good morning or good afternoon to you.
Yes. So can you share a little bit about where you were born and kind of what that looked like, the neighborhood, the family dynamic, and we can start from there?
I was born in the mountains of New Mexico, a place called Taos, which is up in the mountains about 75 miles north of Santa Fe. It was a small community, must have been maybe 2,000 people in it. It's an artist colony, and it's well known for that. There's also a large Pueblo Indian establishment right outside of town, which is also known for. My father was a draftsman. I had two brothers. One brother was a heroin addict and died of a heroin overdose when I was about 25, 30. My sister committed suicide by putting a bullet through her head. And my other younger brother died of a alcohol overdose. He was an alcoholic. We moved to California because there was no work in Taos when I was around 12 years old.
Wow. So just starting first with Taos, so you mentioned that it was an artist colony as well as there was an indigenous community in the area growing up. Were you aware of both of those things as a child?
Oh, absolutely. Interestingly enough, when I got married, I don't remember being single anymore. I've been married 64 years. I took my wife to Taos to meet los primos. Everybody's a primo in these small towns. And we were sitting around with my aunt and uncle speaking in their house in Taos. And I said, we're speaking Spanish. And I said, oh, excuse me, she doesn't speak Spanish. They immediately switched to Tiwa, which is the Indian language, because in Taos, if you don't speak English, if you don't speak Spanish, it didn't occur to them there might be English language.
Wow.
They thought immediately she must be speaking Indian. So they switched to Tiwa. I thought, that's really typical of Taos.
That's unbelievable. So when you were growing up, were you aware of that connection to Tiwa and the indigenous community?
When my sister died, who was very tied with community, we had a ceremony in the Catholic Church because Quintana, ¿verdad? We're Hispanic, so we were all Catholics. And we had my grandmother was there, my great-grandmother. And we had a translator who spoke for my grandparents who did not speak English yet. They spoke Spanish. They translated the English into Spanish for them. There was a younger lady who was Indian, and she said her father was Marlu, my sister's very good friend, and he could not express himself in any other language about her except in Tiwa, in Indian. So she translated the Indian into Spanish. Somebody translated the Spanish into English. And this was the hometown that I lived in. So yes, we were aware of it. When she had her ashes, we buried half of them in the cemetery in Taos, which my parents were buried in. And then we went to the Indian Pueblo, where there were 5 or 6 young Indians, and they scattered her ashes to the wind, did an Indian burial ceremony. At that time, my son was 18 years old. I had taken him. I said, Jason, 2 days ago you were in Los Gatos in your high school. What do you think? He says, Dad, I've seen this on the internet. But so my sister had a Catholic burial, Hispanic burial, and an Indian burial. That was Taos.
Wow. Growing up day to day, was your family more part of the artist community or was it more part of the Indian community?
No, it was part of the Hispanic community. So at that time, there were the Anglos who spoke basically English. As a matter of fact, I disliked very much the Texans who would come into town with money, and I was shining shoes in the plaza, and they spent money like it was nothing, and of course we had nothing. So I grew up with an anti-Texan accent prejudice, and so we were poor, and we left Taos, again, to go to Los Angeles because there was no work for my father in Taos, and he had to support a family.
Sure. And at that point, when you were 12, there was already you and your 3 siblings? So it was a
Yes.
family of 6, and was your mother, father, and you and 3 siblings?
Correct.
So just before moving to Los Angeles, is there anything specific about Taos that is like the most vivid memory, whether that be a ritual memory or just one point in time that, is very close to your heart in terms of your growing up in Taos?
I remember very much going to the Catholic Church for food. I remember being an altar boy in Taos, and with a thought I'd become a Catholic priest. Then I met young women who had boobs, and I said, oops, let me rethink my whole thought. So I gave up my thoughts of becoming a Catholic priest, and instead did not become a Catholic priest, obviously.
Sure.
And we moved to Los Angeles, and then to downtown LA. I mean, Central Market, phenomenal place. Have you ever been to downtown LA and the Central Market? Phenomenal place, especially was 50 years ago.
Wow. Okay, so you're 12 years old. Do you know the year that was that you moved to Los Angeles?
About 1952.
1952. Was it a sad experience for your family to uproot itself from Taos to move to LA, or was it exciting? What was that feeling like as a child?
I think my father had a job at the City Hall. He was a draftsman, and so we lived in an apartment across from the Central Market before we moved to a small outside community, and that's where I grew up until we moved to downtown LA. I don't know if anybody knows where 2nd Street is, or that area near the Central Park. Mm-hmm. But we lived there for many years and I went to high school downtown LA, where, interestingly enough, I met my wife, my future wife. Prior to that time, I went to junior high school in Figueroa Street in Los Angeles. Basically, a lot of Hispanics, a lot of Mexican Spanish speaking. When I graduated from there, I transferred to the high school, Belmont High School, and I found myself in the shop classes. And I never asked for shop. And I didn't understand it, but I was in shop 1, shop 2, metal shop 1, metal shop 2, lumber shop, whatever.
Really?
And I realized I got into the shop classes because of El Nombre Quintana.
Because of your name?
Because of my name. Since I spoke Spanish and I was Hispanic, obviously I was going to go into the shop classes. I think...
And that was not your decision, that was the school's decision.
Yes. And then, probably because they realized for their safety and my safety, I had to get out of shop classes. I transferred into the academic classes. There were 2 academic classes. This was a poor high school, Hispanic, Black, and my wife and me. And that's where I met my wife and she was in the academic classes, and I was transferred in. I was hyperactive.
Now, what year was this? So you were a junior in high school?
Yeah, as a freshman in high school.
Oh, okay.
So I lasted one semester in the shop class before they transferred me. And so I met my wife there. We dated during high school. We dated during college before we got married in Berkeley.
Wow.
UC Berkeley.
How did you pick up on the reasoning behind your placement in shop classes? Did you know you weren't being challenged? Was it a self-starter attitude on your part that you wanted to be in the academic classes?
No, in fact, I don't know why I got transferred to the academic classes. Pretty close to that time, we were starting to take these achievement tests, and I was doing fairly well. Interestingly enough, I have to go back and talk a little bit about my Spanish.
Sure.
First time I went to the Spanish class in high school, I spoke Spanish, got up and spoke Spanish, introduced myself, etc. And she said, "Oh, you're from New Mexico." And I said, How do you know that? She said, you speak hillbilly Spanish.
The Spanish teacher in Los Angeles told you speak hillbilly Spanish?
And I said, what does that mean? So in Taos, it was an isolated mountainous community, right? 6,000 feet elevation, very little contact with the outside world. Spanish did not evolve. And she recognized my Spanish as I was using old, antique words that were no longer used in Spanish. In fact, when I traveled to South America, many times they said, ¿qué? They didn't understand my Spanish and I didn't understand theirs because there was that much difference between the old Spanish, the Mexican Spanish, and the modern Spanish.
That's fascinating.
So I learned that as Spanish there.
You moved to Los Angeles. What was the family dynamic like when you moved to Los Angeles? Because it sounded like you had extended family in Taos. Did you have extended family in LA, or did it become just your immediate family?
Just my immediate family. That's where my brother became a heroin addict. My father was an alcoholic at that time. My mother was an alcoholic at that time. And I was going to high school, taking care of my younger brother basically by myself, making sure the rent was paid so we wouldn't be evicted. And it's not I didn't feel unusual. I didn't feel at that time it was an unusual story. Telling it feels like it is unusual, but
sure,
I didn't feel it unusual.
So because of what you just said, maybe it not feeling as unusual at the time, did you feel the stress of it, or was it just what you did? It kind of sounded like you were almost the glue that bind in the home at that time.
I don't think. I didn't feel particularly stressed. I was fixing lunch for my younger brother, and I. And making sure he got off to school, making sure that the rent was paid sometimes and that groceries were in. But I didn't feel like there was a problem too much. I did resent greatly going down to the local bar to get my father home at 2 o'clock when he'd been drinking to make sure he got the 2-3 blocks home. I remember that, and I very much, we lived in a really tiny apartment on 2nd Street in downtown, near downtown LA, near Beverly Boulevard. But I didn't think much of it. At that time, I was also extremely, and I've been all my life, hyperactive.
Okay.
And probably because of my hyperactivity, there's a lot of stuff that I didn't particularly notice or didn't care about because that's what a hyperactive kid is. In fact, in high school, the English teacher in the class that I was in with my future wife, put me on trial for being disruptive to the class. I think he was a new teacher because he didn't understand hyperactivity. He thought that the class would be able to control me. Well, us hyperactives are not controllable by outside influences. So she put me on trial, and I got life imprisonment with her. I'm still serving it. And the other thing I remember very clearly of high school, at that time we took the Iowa tests, which were achievement tests that you took once a year. And I took the achievement tests, and at that time I didn't know it at the time because I didn't know I was hyperactive. You could request more time to finish a test. Didn't do any of that, but it got my scores, and they were good scores. And when I turned my scores into several of my teachers, they said, "Paul, come on, where are your scores?" I said, "Those are my scores." They said, "Come on, whose scores are these?" And that's how well I did.
Wow.
And I'm not sure I did that well. That was their expectations of what I would do, wasn't it? It wasn't what I did, it's what they expected me to have done.
So between them placing you in shop beforehand and then them questioning your scores, it didn't quite seem like they were betting on you at that high school.
No, absolutely not.
So can you talk about like what was your role model figures at that time? Was it still your parents? Were there other figures in the community that you really looked up to or that kind of had some impact on shaping your eventual trajectory?
No, if anybody did, it would have been my girlfriend, who was, like I said, as I have said, was and is very bright. And I said, hell, if she can do it, I can do it.
Wow.
And that was the big push. When it came time to go to college, my parents didn't go. I was the only one in my family who's ever gone to college, as far as I know. My brothers didn't, my sister didn't, my parents didn't. So I never thought of going to college. But she was going to go to college. I said, wait a minute, if she can do it, I can do it, right? Well, I thought I'd take a year off, work in a filling station, earn some money, and go to college. Then I said to myself, what are the chances if I take a year off that I'll ever go to college? Probably, I thought, pretty minimal.
And this is you as a senior in high school having this thought process.
Mm-hmm. Then my grandfather, who was a mayor in Taos and had been influential in some small New Mexican politics, says, do you want to go to West Point? I said, where's that? He says, it's back east. He says,
to West Point.
King Anderson, Senator Anderson from New Mexico will appoint you to West Point if you want to go. So I had a non-competitive appointment to West Point. I went from LA to San Francisco, took the tests. At that time, I weighed 114 pounds and passed all the tests and got a deferment for my weight, and I went to West Point.
Wow.
I went to West Point for 2 years. West Point, I had a bad situation.
A tumultuous relationship?
Yes, I did. I was hyperactive. I was mouthy. I was a smart ass. The first thing I remember is we were in our barracks, and our squad leader said, write a letter to your congressman, tell him about how happy you are he appointed you here, right? So I wrote a letter to my congressman, gave it to the mail carrier who came up to pick it up and took it up to the squad leader. Squad leader called me up, he says, Paul, open your letter. I said, sir? He says, I want to read your letter. I said, it's addressed to my senator. I gave it to the mail carrier. As far as I'm concerned, it's no longer my letter. It now belongs to him, the senator. I will write him and ask him to return it for your review. He said, no, that's fine. Talk about being hazed for the next couple of weeks over being...
So in other words, this was a squad leader or an instructor? Who was the one that was asking you to read
This
it?
was the West Point upperclassman.
Okay. And so clearly the assignment was they needed to review these letters before being sent, but you took it upon yourself to get it sent right away.
Right. I was the only one at West Point for the 2 years that I was there that I know was going to counseling for attitude. Because, like I said, I thought the role... I was at the West Point Military Academy, right? Military officers. If I graduated, I was going to be sent for Vietnam without question. There was a Naval Academy. There was an Air Force Academy. Where was our Diplomats Academy? There was no such thing. So, as a leftist liberal, by their definition, probably by my own at that time, I got into all sorts of trouble. So when I decided I did not want a military education, I didn't realize, number one, what West Point was, an engineering school, basically. I resigned. And that cost them a lot of grief because nobody resigns West Point and is, as a junior in good grades and in good so-and-so. And I transferred to Berkeley in 1961 during the free speech movement.
Right out of high school, first in your family, as far as you know, to go to college, your grandfather, who's the mayor of Taos,
was the mayor, had been,
was the mayor at the time. He realized that there was a good opportunity because he had a relationship with the senator, and that's a requirement of West Point, right? You need a recommendation from your senator.
Yeah.
So, real quick, outside of just kind of the butting heads nature of that experience at West Point, being the first in your family to go to university, what was that like? Was that revered by your family and your siblings? Was it kind of overlooked? What was that experience like?
Well, at that time, I didn't have a close... I left home when I was 18 years of age. My parents moved back to Taos, interestingly enough. And interestingly enough, they quit drinking the minute they got to Taos.
Really?
When he retired and they moved to Taos, they quit drinking except for occasional beers, but nowhere the alcoholism. Then I think what happened, to put it in a little bit of perspective, I graduated from Berkeley. And Berkeley, for something, well, we can go into that, I decided to go to medical school.
Okay.
So I told my father I was going to go to medical school. At that time, I didn't understand his reaction. He said, why? You've been to college. why are you going to medical school? You've been to college. And I realized later on it wasn't about medical school. It was the fact that that's as far as his vision could see. So
yeah,
if that gives you some idea of...
For sure. Okay, so just quickly back to West Point. Was there any friendships made that lasted from there, or lessons learned, or was it really just like oil and water for you during those 2 years?
The educational system was phenomenal. So at West Point, every month, they came out with a list of what your grade point average is. Every day I went to a math class, let's say. The instructor would say I was in the 13th section, or 20 sections, or 15 sections. I was pretty high up. He'd say, okay, the proof on, you were supposed to read pages so-and-so on your math book. The proof on page so-and-so is a little bit tricky. Here's how I want to explain it. He says, okay, even boards, everybody go to the boards. We all go to blackboards. Even boards do problems 6, 7, and 9. Hard boards do so-and-so. And Quintana and cadet so-and-so, you have front boards. And then you go and talk to him in front of him. And every day you got a score of how you did. And of course, if I was having to explain my board, I have classmates, right? We're all competitive as good shit. You couldn't believe it. So I would say I was given to calculate the trajectory of a missile, so-and-so and so-and-so, and not explain what I did. And then one of my cadet friends would say, how did you go from step 1 to step 3? He said, blah, blah, blah. But every day you got graded. At the month, the grades came out, and you were assigned to a different. If I did really well, I would go up a classroom. If I did bad, I'd go down a classroom.
Oh, interesting.
So one day my instructor was sick, and I got sent from section 13 down to about section 5. The instructor said, here's what you were supposed to study. Let me show you how to do that, so. The amount of help he gave them was incredible. I just had no concept because we didn't get that kind of help on the 13th. I was second man in Spanish. I spoke Spanish fluently for that. First guy, his accent was terrible, but I swear to God, he never made a mistake. He was first man in math, first in English, first in history. He was a genius. And his accent was terrible, but he never missed a syllable, he never missed a comma. So I was number 2 and he was number 1.
So, in other words, the schooling you appreciated, but outside of that, were you just ready to kind of move on?
Oh yeah, I think I was not happy with the politics. Westmoreland, who ran Vietnam, was a commandant when I was there, and I thought the emphasis was really, they were training you to be an officer.
Sure.
Given that, an officer in the military, had I known I was going to a medical school, I might have stayed at West Point. Immediately after graduation, gone to medical school, taken the longest residence I could have, and then retired at 49, right? With full pay, but I had no concept that I was going to go to.
Sure.
So after I left there, I moved to Berkeley. Lee was at Berkeley already, and so I went to Berkeley, had a minor in Spanish, a minor in math, a minor in anthropology, and a major in genetics.
So that's 3 minors and 1 major.
What does that tell you about my attention spans?
You had a lot of interest, put it that way.
Well, I was ADHD. So,
Before did they know it was ADHD at the time?
No.
Or was that that's a more...
Well, they didn't, I was just supposed to be Hispanic rambunctious, period. Maybe had I been in academic school, I might have been picked up earlier.
Sure. So, okay, I know we're going to jump into Berkeley now, but very quickly, you had mentioned that there was a bit of a political misalignment that you already had at West Point. You said you were a left liberal. Now, was that something that was cultivated as a high schooler for you? When did you start thinking politically and having these convictions?
Probably in high school. I was very familiar with McCarthyism, was very familiar with what was going on in the world. And part of it was my wife is Jewish, and they were politically active also, and so I picked up a lot of stuff from her. So it was that kind of a thing.
Got it.
So the other thing I remember about West Point As being ADHD, I didn't know my right from my left. I still don't. Without that ring finger, I don't know what that's my left hand. And so I remember marching with my squad leader on the parade ground, just him and I, with a rock in my right hand. And he'd say, left foot, rock, to turn right.
Oh my gosh.
And
wow.
I marched in John F. Kennedy's inauguration parade, and we all wore white gloves. And I've seen tapes of my group. I was immaculate. I had learned so quickly to watch just where they put the group in front of me, where they put their heel, and which way they were going to shift. So let's say left turn, right turn. I didn't know which way I was doing. I was just following the flow.
So you just brought up a very interesting point. So you were there 60 and 61 at West Point. And so you said that you were at and marched at John F. Kennedy's inauguration.
Yeah.
So what was that experience like?
First of all, it was incredibly cold. I mean, I can't believe how cold. And we get there to the parade ground early. We stand around. We're trying to find cars that were open so we could sit in them and get warm. It was so incredibly cold. But I remember when they said to salute Kennedy, and he and his wife were up on the podium. When he was assassinated, I felt I had a connection that was really bothersome.
Now, he said his famous, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Do you remember hearing that live, or were you so focused on the freezing weather?
I was so focused on turning right at the right time.
Sure. Okay, but that's a very interesting factoid that you were at the Kennedy inauguration. So it sounds like you transferred to Berkeley. You had been dating your girlfriend, your high school girlfriend, Lee, through your time at West Point as well?
Yes, but she was here on the West Coast and I was there, so we only saw ourselves once or twice in that whole time.
But was that a big reason for you applying to Berkeley?
Probably, yes. Now, interestingly enough, I don't remember applying to Berkeley. I don't remember filling out an application form. I don't remember saying, what were your grades like? Here's what you need to do. All of a sudden, I remember being on the bus from LA to Berkeley and seeing UC Berkeley next left. I remember that very clearly, and to this day. When I go to Berkeley, I still remember seeing that.
Wow.
So, and then at Berkeley, Lee and I were heavily involved in the free speech movement.
So can you enlighten me a little bit on what was going on campus and what the free
campus
speech
was
movement
during
was
the
like?
Mario Savio time, and during the free speech movement. I lived in the co-ops. We had no help from my parents or her parents, nor did she. So we had to support ourselves through Berkeley. So we lived in co-ops, which were the low-cost housing that you provide part of the labor. So for the housing, so I was the laundry manager. I'd pass out sheets once a week, and she worked in the kitchen, and sometimes I'd have to work in the kitchen washing dishes or whatever to help pay for our room and board.
Okay. And were the co-ops owned by the university?
No, they were individually. We're still a member of them because they supported us greatly. There was a guy, and his name was Tam. He was from Taiwan. He lived upstairs from me, and he would only speak to me in Chinese because he thought I was trying to pass. And I said, no, I'm not Chinese. He says, well,
he thought you were trying to pass as non-Chinese?
As a non-Chinese. And in fact, in Berkeley, a lot of people thought I was Japanese. Well, there were a lot of Japanese at that time there. So Tam called me up and he says, Paul, I'm applying to medical school and I want to be sure I have would you help me fill out my application, make sure I have everything. So he says, I need to have so many units of English. Got him. I had him. So many units of foreign language. He had him. I had him. There's so much science. He had it. I had it. All of a sudden, I became pre-med.
Wow. So by helping your friend, you realized that you had met all the prereqs.
And became pre-med right then and there. That was 2 months before graduation.
2 months before graduating from Berkeley?
Yeah.
Wow. So did you do a scramble to apply to med school? Was that not too late to...
No, I applied to... Lee and I got married the last semester at Berkeley. We were broke. So I applied to 3 medical schools. Puerto Rico, which had no application fee. UC San Francisco had a $5 application fee. and UCLA, which shared the application fee with Berkeley, with UC San Francisco. We went to Puerto Rico. We couldn't afford to live there. Lee couldn't get a job because she didn't speak Spanish. The school in Puerto Rico, the medical school in Puerto Rico was not as had been depicted to me. So we ended up going to Puerto Rico, living there for 2-3 weeks, coming back to San Francisco. To LA. I took a job at UC San Francisco.
And this is 64?
63.
63, okay.
And then I was working there, and San Francisco kept calling me person to person. Lee said, "You can't get him. He's at the university already working." Then she heard UC hospital. And so she called them back. They put her through the admissions office. They said I had an alternative spot if I wanted it.
Okay, can you break that down for me a little bit so I can understand? So you originally had your eye on 3 med schools.
All based on the basis of
the cost of
applying.
You went to check out Puerto Rico because that was the free application.
And I got in.
And you got in. But you realized it wasn't going to work because Lee wouldn't be able to find work and it was going to be too expensive. So the both of you went back to Los Angeles?
She got a job in the library. I got a job at USC.
But not related to med school?
Not related to med school. We were going to save money to apply in 1 or 2 years.
And that's when she received the call.
She recognized that it was coming from there. And I applied, and I went to medical school 3 weeks late because I'd been working and they had been trying to get a hold of me.
Wow.
And so I went to medical school. Interestingly enough, when I was at when I was at Berkeley, I was a dishwasher. We were supplying our own food, everything. We would pay for everything. So I was a dishwasher in the laboratory. There were 2 young ladies there who became good friends of mine, and I was their dishwasher. And I would wash their Erlenmeyer flasks for their chemistry sets and so. And then all of a sudden, I show up right next to them in medical school. They said, "Paul, what are you doing here? You're the dishwasher."
You're kidding me.
No, and I said, "Yeah." And here I am.
Wow, it's amazing.
So my wife and I worked our way through medical school, and then went back down to LA to Children's Hospital of Los Angeles, where I did an internship and residency.
So because you had it sounded like from your story, you really didn't know that med school was your path until you were helping this friend out 2 months before graduation.
I knew no doctor. I had no, role model.
Sure.
There's nobody that I knew that I would.
So did you feel like you were thrown into the fire, so to speak, in medical school, or did it come naturally once things began?
No, but I'll tell you a story. Again, we were working our way through medical school, so I was doing a lot of human experimentation. The only job I turned down was when they wanted to do vocal cord recordings, and they said, "Well, put needles in your vocal cords, but you couldn't be hoarse afterwards, or you could lose your voice." I said, "Forget it." But I would do things where I'd fall asleep on the bed, and then my leg would be going up and down as I stimulated nerves and stuff. One time, an orthopedic surgeon was putting Stenman pins into my bones in the back. And he says, "Quintana," he says, "do I know you?" And I said, paranoia goes way up. He bangs on it, and I get a pounding headache. And I said, "No, sir." He says, "Oh," he said, "did you go to West Point?" I said, "Yes." He says, "I was on the admission committee. They gave you a very bad recommendation. They questioned your motivation. If you quit West Point, why would you not quit medical school?"
Really?
So I didn't understand them, so I called West Point and I actually spoke to their people there, and it was obvious that this was a political issue, not a so-and-so, so I voted for your admission. So this was now years later, West Point had tried to keep me out of medical school.
Wow.
Isn't that impressive?
Yeah.
Again, click against the military academies.
Oh my gosh. So, but I just want to touch on one thing. So you said, I didn't quite follow when you first said the human experimenting, but basically you were doing anything that was going to pay you, right?
Absolutely.
So you...
Sleep studies, nutrition studies, drinking crap that you wouldn't believe, and then having blood drawn, arterial punctures and...
Oh my gosh.
Well...
But you were able to sustain. So this really was... You were supporting yourself through med school, but it sounded like you were
Lee was working as a secretary at the medical center too.
Okay.
And we were living right down the street from the medical center on Parnassus, and then went up to Mary Student Housing for the last 2 years when we got into married student housing.
So you figured out kind of trial by fire, essentially, how to become a doctor through med school, right? To your point, you didn't have a role model. You didn't really have much of a perspective of what being a doctor was like. So what made you choose the specialty or focus that you ended up finding?
Well, interesting enough, I liked internal medicine. And I said, but I'm not that fond of old people, including me being old, but given the alternatives, I'll take age. So I prescribed a lot of dogs because old people seem to be pretty lonely. Many of them were living alone. And I said, internal medicine, I've liked a lot of it, but I don't. And in the years to come, the population is get older and older. So I said no for internal medicine. I liked surgery a lot, but I was terrible with my hands. I didn't know my right from my left. I said, sure as shit, I'll cut off the wrong leg. And I didn't like the surgery, but I liked the decision-making of the surgery. And I remember a very, very famous surgeon that was on staff there came to see a lady that I was taking care of, an old lady who needed her gallbladder taken out. And he explained to her that she'd be going to the operating room the following day and having her gallbladder taken out. And she said, not unless my doctor says it's okay. Me too. I looked around for her doctor. She said, him. I was a medical student who had been interviewing her and talking to her. And of course, I spoke Spanish, right? So Dr. Bailey, who's this very, very well-known surgeon, says, I'll talk to your doctor and make sure that we're on the same page. So I liked surgery, but I didn't like the surgery. And I didn't like blood, but I liked decision-making. Then I hit pediatrics. And it just clicked. There was nothing I didn't like about it. So I became a pediatrician.
Wow. So med school ended, and did you have to do a residency, or you went right into practice? So I went to
Children's Hospital. I went to Children's Hospital in Los Angeles.
So you went from LA up to med school in SF, and then you and your wife moved back to Los Angeles afterwards.
Right. Almost right back to where we live, because the Children's Hospital is on 2nd Street in Vermont. All right, and that's right back where I started.
Wow.
So I spent a year there as an intern, and then was there as 2 years as a resident. Then I was a chief resident.
Wow.
And I loved it there. I thought there was a great hospital. Upset as could be when I found out it was a private hospital. I thought it was a public hospital. Don't ask me.
Really?
Yeah.
So was that a big reason for you wanting to join it? You thought
No, because it was such a variety of cases and good teaching and so on. So I rotated a lot through Old County, the big county hospital, because there they just turned you free. Mm-hmm. Take care of the ward's all yours. And I said, well, who's my consultant? Consultant? Get serious. I'd be calling Children's to say, let me talk to the neurologist, please. I need to ask him a question.
Wow.
So I spent 4 years there and got involved in working in the free clinics of LA for that. And
I should have asked about this quickly before, but I don't necessarily want to go on too big of a tangent. But quickly, when you were at Berkeley, can you talk a little bit about some of the specific memories you have or involvements that you and your wife took part in terms of the free speech movement? I feel like that's a pretty interesting, unique place and time to be at Berkeley. So is there anything that comes to mind?
So in the quad downtown, so there was a lot of free speech activities. So we went to all the rallies, we donated money, we donated food, we donated our bodies. Interesting enough, when I went to medical school, the auto row demonstrations are going on. And so it was at the hotel, the Belmont Hotel. And Lee and I had been going to these, and we got arrested several times and released. We got picked up by the cops and then released. Nat Burbridge at that time was the head of the NAACP, and he was on the faculty at UC San Francisco, where I was a medical student. He called me up and he said, Paul, keep protesting, keep going. Do not get arrested. You do not want to give the university any excuse to kick you out of medical school. You'll be much more valuable as a physician for the civil rights movement than you're going to be as an ex-medical student. So Lee and I continued to go to all the demonstrations, but we resisted, which we had not tried to do, getting arrested. So
sure.
If there was going to be an altercation or an arrest, we would back off and move away. Otherwise, we were very active during this whole civil rights era.
Wow.
On that time. As a matter of fact, Lee and I ran the biggest voter registration in the Mission District that has ever been done.
And when was this?
This is the Goldwater era. Remember Goldwater's running for president?
Was that 64?
64.
Yep.
And so we ran a huge, we had groups joining us everywhere against the Goldwater people. The Du Bois Club, which is a leftist club, and they were great. The Democrats bought us a whole headquarters downtown Mission District on Mission.
And this is while you're undergrads at Berkeley?
No, this is when I was a medical student.
Oh, wow.
So we were very active during medical school. And again, Beveridge said, do not get arrested anymore. Keep protesting. Then we started running the free speech movement in the medical center. In fact, the medical center sent me to Chicago for a SNCC, a Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, general nationwide meeting.
Wow.
And I was asked if I wanted to become supervisor in San Francisco because I spoke Spanish, because we had this huge mass following in the Mission District. And I said, I think I want to be a medical student.
Sure.
I think I want to be a doctor, not a politician.
Wow. You were very active politically, similar to how your wife, your girlfriend at the time, was kind of an encouragement for you to go to college. Was she also your encouragement to get politically active, or did you have political activism in your bones?
No, I don't. I think we just meshed. I don't remember a time when we said let's do this or let's do that. It just evolved. I think we'd been going together for 6 years before we got married.
Right.
So during that time, you get to know her, and she gets to know me. And so it didn't take much of a nudge either way for us to move one way or the other. And if it took 2 or 3 or 4 nudges, we knew we weren't going to move, so we quit nudging.
Okay, so now back to where we were. You had finished, you were chief resident at the Children's Hospital in Los Angeles. So then where did you start your own practice after that? What was life like after that?
We had a very famous professor come from Brooklyn, from the Bronx, the Montefiore Hospital. Dr. Feinberg is a very, very famous man, and he came as a visiting professor.
And what was he famous for?
Pediatrics.
Okay.
Fluid electrolytes, basically, but pediatrics. And I hid patients from him. I'd put them in the elevator. I'd lied to him about drugs. I'd lied to him about the lab work. I'd lied to him right and left because I realized that what he could teach us as interns, residents, is how to think. He was so bright that if you said so-and-so, this is what the sodium was, he immediately knew what to do. And I said, you know what? That's not the way we see it at 2 in the morning. I don't know at 2 in the morning what the sodium is. I got to take care of a sick kid. So I lied to him right and left. I mean, and years later, I realized he knew I was lying.
Okay, but so just so I'm understanding, you were lying to him because you knew that you could learn more from him
by following his thinking rather than his knowledge.
Interesting.
His process of thinking. So he invited me to go to the Bronx to be his fellow on the basis of the experience with him in LA. And he says, your starting date is June 1st for all the fellows and, the residencies and so and so.
By the way, what year are we at now?
1967.
1967, okay.
So, I'm sorry, 71.
1971, okay.
So the chief resident, the guy who had been with me, chief resident, I had done my military through West Point and through the guard system. He had the berry plant, so as soon as he graduated, he got drafted, and he got sent to Turkey for the U.S. Air Force.
The other
chief resident.
Okay, but you were the chief resident as well.
Yes, 2 of us.
Okay.
So he called me from Turkey. He says, Paul, I'm in Ankara. My wife is here. We have this huge house. We have servants all over the place. Why don't you and Jason, we had a son who was 2 years old already. He says, why don't you come and join us to Turkey? When's the last time you're going to get an offer to go to Turkey? Mm-hmm. So I called Dr. Finberg. That's when I learned a lesson. I said, sir, I have this opportunity to go to Turkey for three 3 months, I'd like to start my fellowship late. He said, Paul, you signed a contract for June 1st. Don't be late. I said, sir, I'm not going to get this opportunity again. I really was looking forward to coming to work with you. He says, you'll be here no later than September 1st.
So he actually accommodated you?
Accommodated. Then I realized, if you want it enough, you'll never get it if they don't want you to have it. If you're willing to give it up, you have a negotiating point.
Interesting.
Right?
So in other words, when you told him, hey, this is once in a lifetime, I'm going to do this, he accommodated you.
Right.
Because he knew you would, yeah.
So we went to Turkey for 3 months with a 2-year-old.
Wow. What was that experience like? Had you already been a traveler with Lee, with your wife before then?
Mm-mm. So that was our first trip, and we spent 3 months all over Turkey with a 3-year-old, and dogs and animals and languages and food that we never heard of. And it was a phenomenal experience. We still have stuff from Turkey. I can show you a picture of Jason in Turkey where he's trying to keep away from the Turks because they want to pinch his cheeks. Came back to the Bronx. I thought it was. He said, "You come to New York City." I thought I was going to Midtown Manhattan. Turned out to be the Bronx. But anyway, I spent a year working with him. During that time, I learned a lot from him. Number one, I learned to lie him again because I was in charge of the ICU. Because then I found out his nurse made rounds with him before coming to the ICU and would tell him, "Here's what we admitted last night. This kid came in with a weight loss and diarrhea and dehydration, and this is the lab that showed us." So we came in on rounds the next morning. He was brilliant. I got to her and I said, "That's it. No more."
So in other words, he was getting briefed before everybody.
Right. And now we made the rounds and he says, "What about this kid?" And I said, "Sir, he came in last night at 2 o'clock in the morning. By 1 o'clock, we'd sent lab off and so and so and so." And he says, "What did the lab show?" He says, "It's not back yet, sir." I had them already. And then again, he started to say, "Okay, you got this kid. This is what you'd be doing. This is what you think of. If it's this way, this is where you are. If it's this way."
So by doing this, again, similar to what you did while you were a resident, you got to see his thought process as opposed to his quick answers to the information.
See, I already had it, right? Then he calls me and he says, "Paul, I'm going to Peru for 3 months. I'm leaving you with my associate, who's a really nice guy, really good guy." And I said, "Dr. Finberg, I came to work with you. I did not come to work with Dr. Kravitz." He says, "Paul, but I'm not taking your family." So I moved my family down to Lima, Peru, and Dr. Finberg and I ran a metabolic unit in Lima, Peru, and that's where I started going to Machu Picchu and Cusco and all over Lima. I told you the story of going to Cusco, and the flight was canceled, and the next day they said there's no flights available. I picked up Jason, who was 2 years old at the time, sat him on the counter in front of the lady, pinched him really hard under the leg, and he started crying and screaming. I said, "He needs to see his mother. He hasn't seen her for a while now. We got to get to Cusco." She said, "Okay, here are your tickets." And then a couple of minutes later, "Well, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, come to the counter, please." So we got to Cusco on that. And
okay, this is now still 1972, I guess? This is within that first year of working with Dr.
Finberger.
Finward? Finberger. Now, you got the travel bug with your wife and your son in Turkey. That was your first big trip. You loved it. Now, within a year, you're working abroad. This is your first time actually. Were you working in Turkey or was that just pleasure?
Just pleasure.
So this is your first time doing
work,
medical work outside of the U.S. borders.
So I'd examine an Indian child in Peru, and he would die of malnutrition. The next day, I'd talk to the parents and commiserate. The next day, what did they do? They brought me the second born, also dying of malnutrition.
Really?
Yeah.
So what was that experience like, seeing what I imagine to be a very different medical system in Peru versus in the United States, coming as a doctor? What did that teach you, or in terms of your perspective of the medical field?
That no matter where medicine is, someplace in the world, it's not necessarily where home is. I mean, so after I left Finberg and New York, interestingly enough, this man was a very, very powerful man all over the country. He had a book of literature that he had written for just stacks long. I never asked him for a recommendation for a job. Everybody else did. I didn't. And he said, why? And I said, there's something about saying, I'm going to get this job because he recommended me, as opposed to I'm going to get this job because of me.
So it was actually a conscious decision to not get his recommendation.
Right. I was probably the only one who, in his lifetime, who never asked him for a letter of recommendation or something. So then I applied to Kaiser Hospital, and so I became part of the Kaiser system for 30 years. I worked for Kaiser, and again, part of it, that was a conscious decision. I said, I don't like the business of medicine. I like medicine. I don't want to know how much the rent is or how much I pay the nurse or so and so. I just want to practice medicine. Kaiser took care of all of that. All I did was practice medicine.
Absolutely. And so that's where you went full-time into being a pediatrician through the Kaiser Permanente system.
Correct.
So can you now talk me through, I've seen throughout your home these incredible artifacts from countries all over the world. So I know you've now had your first experience in Peru, kind of doing travel medicine. When was your next, and when did this new kind of path for you really kick off, where you're traveling for medicine all over the world?
There was a phenomenal surgeon at Stanford. He set up a foundation to go to South America to take his residents to train them down there because he felt Stanford was holding him back.
What years was this?
1972, 73.
Okay.
So on one of the trips to South America, oh, Jesus, you know what? I was already flying with the Flying Doctors, which was a pediatric trip from the San Francisco area down to Mexico to do medicine. But I'd done 3 or 4 flights with them until I got hooked up with the surgeons, and the surgeons started paying all my transportation, all my expenses to go to South America to translate for surgery. So I started going to Mexico. I went all over Mexico. Then I went to Honduras and all over Central America. Then I worked my way all the way back down to Peru. So I worked in Peru as a physician, as a volunteer for, 10 times, and all over South America. Then again, because I was doing this and was familiar with taking care of kids for surgery. Now we're talking about surgery. So as a pediatrician, the surgeons wanted me to along because if I was there and a kid got sick on the ward, had fever, bleeding, vomiting, something, they would have to scrub somebody up and stop surgery. That backed up the operating room. By taking me, I took care of everything outside the operating room, kept them all working full time.
Got it. So the value that you provided was you could do the general medicine so that the operators and the surgeons could focus on just that.
Exactly. So as soon as the kid got out, they pick him up, take him to the OR, put the next kid down. They didn't have to go up to the ward to see who was next or so and so. I had already made sure they were not eating, that they had no fevers, that they were clear for surgery. All that was set. I would talk to the parents, the grandparents, the great-grandparents, because in many of these places, it's not just the family unit is the family unit.
Sure.
And so I got called to go to Southeast Asia because of my experience in South America. The first trip to Vietnam was 1990. That was right after the war. No, the war ended in 73. So we were the first Americans let into the country after the war.
Oh, wow.
And I was the only one that was being asked by the locals, is this your first visit to our country? And it took the second week, 2 weeks for me to figure out what they wanted to know. Is this your first visit to our country? I would have been the only one old enough to have been there during the war.
Interesting.
So I was 50 years old at that time when I went my first trip to Vietnam.
So they were trying to suss out if you were part of the war effort for the Americans. Got it. Very interesting.
And then I ended up going to Vietnam, which I enjoy very, very much, 10, 15 times. My last trip was when I was 83 years old. I went to Quang Ngai, Vietnam to work. By that time I had no license, so I went as a physician I went as a mentor and as a lecturer.
Wow.
So at 83, I did my last trip to Vietnam. But from Vietnam, I went to Nepal multiple times. I went to Cambodia, Laos, Burma. I love Burma. China, Bangladesh, Tibet. Can you imagine going to Tibet to work? Wow. So I've done about 170 trips.
170 trips. Huh? And each of those trips was outside the United States?
One trip was inside the United States. I went to an Indian reservation here in California.
Wow.
Otherwise,
so at each of these trips, was there a specific medical focus that you knew was going to be, your focus or the group's focus? In other words, like a specific surgery being done?
Yes, as a rule, we were plastic surgeons.
Okay.
So we were going to be doing cleft lips, cleft palates. And that's what started it all, cleft lips, cleft palates. Then we expanded it to burns, to doing more and more burns. As we trained surgeons, local surgeons, to do lips and palates, they were able to keep up with that, but then we started working with burns, especially in places like Nepal and in Southeast Asia. They throw acid in women's faces. So we did facial burn, a lot of facial burns. Wow. And orthopedic burns and contractures and stuff like that. So you saw some of the pictures of the stuff that we've been doing. So I worked basically with plastic surgeons. When I went to Lesotho, Africa, to work in an HIV hospital, which is 100% HIV. There we did general surgery, not so much plastic, because they needed help. The surgeon there needed help with general surgery. So we were there. I went with a general surgeon to help out in Lesotho, Africa.
In Lesotho?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So 170 trips. This was all during your 30 years at Kaiser Permanente.
Correct.
How often or how much time out of each year would you be abroad doing these trips?
Well, so at Kaiser, remember I was hyperactive?
Yes.
So I worked in the clinic. I had my own very large, high-intensity clinic. Took care of a lot of ADHD kids. Was the only pediatrician to take care of transplant patients, cardiac transplants, renal transplants. And I started, along with a friend of mine, started the ICU and the NICU, the neonatal intensive care, and the pediatric intensive care units. And I was working on the ward. Kaiser came to me and said, "You can't do it all. Which one do you want?" I said, "Oh, Christ." I said, "Pediatric ICU is too difficult." So I went to the NICU. So the NICU is a neonatal intensive care unit where I became a micro-preemie specialist.
Micro-preemie specialist.
That means I was taking care of babies who were born around 2 kilos.
Wow.
Or 1 kilo, depending on this. So I was basically doing a lot of neonatal stuff. There we would work a 40-hour week, a 50-hour week, a 60-hour week, then back down to 40-hour week. So everything that above 40 hours, I accumulated time off that I could either take as pay or time off. That's how I took so much time off. And at Kaiser Santa Clara, where I worked, they had 35 pediatricians. So everybody got one patient more if I cancel all of my clinics, right? Everybody got one a day. If I worked downtown Los Gatos with a pediatrician, 2 or 3 in an office, and I canceled a day, everybody would get 10 patients.
Right.
Big difference.
Right.
So I was able to, without a lot of hassle, or none, take huge amounts of time off to go on these trips. So I was doing about 2-3 trips a year.
Wow. So really your vacation time was you working abroad by doing these trips?
Well, I also got a week's educational leave and 2 weeks vacation.
Okay.
On top of this was all ATO, accumulated time off.
Wow. But it sounds like you found a career that specifically aligned with both your interests, but also your personal passions, which it sounds like travel is very much part of.
Yes, and it was fulfilling. It was a gas. It was really, I loved it. I mean, I loved traveling it. And I went to Kaiser and I talked to the pediatric department. And I said, you guys should get into this stuff. They need pediatricians all the time, and so. And I said, it's not very stressful. And the 2 guys raised their hands and said, we've been on 1 trip apiece. It is very stressful. And remember what I said? I didn't tend not to feel stress. I don't think I remember ever being stressed on these trips. I lost a couple of kids on trips. They died on me, and I remember one in Peru who died, and we were devastated. It shouldn't have died, but I think it was an anesthetic death, personally. And we were devastated, and the family came to us and said, they were Indian, Peruvian Indian, and they said, please tell your people not to be so concerned about us. We are used to death. We live with it. This is just another one of our days. And Dad lost a 7-year-old son.
Wow.
So this is, you get this stuff. I was in Cusco, Peru. And Lee and I were going back to Cusco, not to Machu Picchu. And we were walking in the plaza there. And this guy comes up and gives me this big hug. And I check my wallet. Well, I hate that. But I said, and I said, well, who is this guy and what does he want? And I thought he was trying to sell me drugs or something. He says, don't you remember me? And I said, no. He says, you were here last year with a plastic surgery team. And I said, oh yeah, we were here working in Cusco. He said, look. And he parted his mustache and he had a scar.
He had a cleft.
He had a cleft lip, a wide open cleft lip. And he said, since you repaired it, I've gotten engaged, I'm going to get married, and I'm becoming a teacher.
Wow.
And he said, I really want to thank you for what you did. The point there is not that we did it, is that somebody donated money for me to be able to go to do it for him. All right?
Yeah. Wow. So how incredible to, you likely knew that you were helping and changing lives through the work you're doing.
Yes.
But to get that actual verbal validation confirming how you positively impacted somebody's life, I'm sure that stuck with you as you've shared with me today.
Yeah, and that was 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So, this is part of the reason why you do it. You just decide, are we part of the human race or aren't we? And if we are, when do we stop being part of the human race?
Yeah.
Is it a question of age? I don't think so. I'd do it again. I got called by Doctors Without Borders and said, can you go to Poland to work? I said, Poland? This was 2 years ago. I said, Poland? What's in Poland for Doctors Without Borders? And they said, the refugees from Ukraine. It didn't even occur to me at that time that they would have medical needs, right? But of course. Yeah. So, and of course I couldn't go. I now say to people, if I can get my doctor from Kaiser to come with me on a trip, I'll go on a trip. I'm getting too tied to my medical care system at 85, but I'd go in a heartbeat.
So just in terms of reflecting specifically on those 170 trips, is there anything outside of what you've already shared that stuck with you in terms of experiences or lessons learned perhaps, or just perspectives gained through those trips, or anyone in particular that comes to mind?
I think that one of the things that I always worry about age. When will I be too old to do another trip? I've had my hip replaced. Should that keep me from going on a trip? And I decided that my focus on the age, rather than my focus on function and my function and somebody else's need, was probably was more accurate to say, I need to think of what I can do. If I can go up and down the stairs here, I can go up and down the stairs in a hospital. If somebody needs and I can do it, what does being 75, 80, 83? So but there is a limit, obviously.
Sure.
There comes a time when you just have to say, okay, time to work around the yard, work downtown, go to the local shop classes and help there, or something like that. But I'm sad to say that my foreign travel trips for work have come to an end. Last year, Lee and I took a trip on the Danube because we'd never been to Eastern Europe. We went to the Czech Republic and down the river, and that was really nice. But it was in a boat. I had a comfortable bed and air conditioning if I wanted it. I remember being in the jungles of Peru, looking up and seeing nothing but thatched huts and saying, "Oh my God, the juvet bugs!" And what if? I remember coming down with hepatitis I blame Guatemala for the hepatitis. But in fact, when I went back and checked the calendar time of the onset and so, I probably got hepatitis here and took it down there. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But I always blame them, hepatitis. I converted my TB skin test positive. I was worried about parasites. So there's always things that you have to worry about.
Sure. But what kept you going 170 times? Like what, I'm sure to the point you shared where you had been talking to folks at Kaiser and I guess 2 of your colleague doctors had shared that they'd done one trip and it was stressful. What kept you going 170 times?
Stress addiction?
Stress addiction?
I don't know. First of all, people say you gave a lot. I'm not so sure I see it as I got a lot. It was really fulfilling. It was, do you know about Haiti?
About Haiti?
Yeah.
And the earthquake?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I worked for 2 weeks at Haiti right after the earthquake. We were the first medical teams in Haiti after the surgeons and the orthopedics left and had amputated everything they could, and we were there. And I have to say, I talked to a mother and I'd be examining the baby. I said, your baby's fine. He's 6 months old. He looks fine. I don't think the earthquake did any problem. And she said, oh, I'm not the mother. I'm his sister. His mother died in the earthquake. The father died. My mother and his father died in the earthquake. We're all that's left. And you say, there are places that need us a lot. Picked up a kid with meningitis, couldn't find any hospital to take him because all the walls were down, the pharmacies were down. 2 days earlier, Doctors Without Borders set up a tent. Walked in and said, we got a kid. He said, guy comes with a gurney, he says, we're going to do a spinal tap, we'll let you know right away what's going on. So I ran into Doctors Without Borders in Tibet, I've run into them in Nepal, I've run into them in Haiti. But the Haiti trip, over 200,000 people died in an earthquake.
It sticks with you.
So,
now, if you could talk to somebody who is in medical school or in their residency, what would your recommendation be to them in terms of these experiences and the opportunity to travel and be useful medically outside of the States? Would you recommend these trips to them as well?
Oh, absolutely. And I'd probably say, if you go, you have to have your defenses with you. There's no question about that, your emotional defenses. But you got to let them down. You got to let yourself feel what they feel. If the distance is too great, what you've learned is how to cut, how to suture. You haven't learned about a person, their heart, their families. You have to learn to find your level at which you can function, but still feel. The inability to feel, I think, would be the worst thing that could happen to somebody doing these trips. The best thing, feel it and really hurt, but keep going.
That's extremely important. Do you find that your experiences on these trips made you a more successful doctor in your full-time role at Kaiser?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Only because you have to understand what a pediatrician is. A pediatrician, I didn't consider a pediatrician takes care of children. A pediatrician takes care of a family. And if you're taking care of a kid, you're worried about this other kid, that other kid, this other kid in the family. This kid is fine, but now you say, sure, let's talk about this kid because that's why you brought him in, but when are we going to see this one? Or I remember very clearly at a Kaiser meeting to a family, I was taking care of a 2-year-old, and he was sitting on the mother's lap, and I checked the kid out, and the mother had bruises on her arms. And I called the nurse, I said, take Johnny out and entertain him for a while. I talked to the mother. And I said, Mrs. So-and-so, I said, I'm going to help but notice the things, the bruises on your arms and your back. I said, you do know we have people who can help with this. If there's a problem at home, we'd be happy to see what we can do. And she said, oh, She gave me a hug. She says, Dr. Quintana, I'm a full contact karate student. These are not from my husband or anybody at home. These are from...
But how important it is for you to perceive that, right? Because it could have been the other
she
scenario.
said. She said, she said, infuse them in your thinking because I saw, but in the third world, abuse is really common, right? And so this was an extension of
being aware
and saying, do I want to take this on or not? And saying, what am I here for?
Exactly. We've already heard multiple times throughout your story from high school, Berkeley, traveling through med school, all throughout, is the one constant being your wife, Lee. So can you talk about, first of all, how long have you two been married?
We're having this is January, 64th wedding anniversary.
64th wedding anniversary. And you knew each other for 6 years prior.
So I like to say I don't remember being single anymore.
Well,
and the other thing is sometimes I'll say I've been married 64 years. And they say, well, that's great. I said, yeah, but it's 4 different wives. Actually, it's not, but...
So can you share a little bit about what marriage has taught you over the decades?
Probably the single most important is to be upfront. If you feel it, say it. And be careful how you react to what she says. I think probably that's the most important thing. And a lot of it is more her understanding what it's like to live with an ADHD. I would say to her, I have to go to the hospital. I'll be right back in half an hour. She'd say, Paul, it takes a half an hour to get there, half an hour to get back. You're going to be there an hour. How can you be back in half an hour? Do we have any concept of time? No. She knows that I'm that kind of thing. So she has an understanding of what I am, and I have an understanding of what she is. And I think that we've evolved. It's not like all of a sudden it's like you learn to walk. You don't learn to run right off the bat. You learn to take the first step and the second step. That's what a marriage is like. You learn to take the first step, the second step, the third step, before you're walking together and running together. And I think that people who think that they can get into a marriage and start running right away are going to be disappointed.
Is there any specific memories, whether that's early marriage, mid, or maybe more recent, that have just reminded you of how lucky you are in terms of the partnership you and Lee have?
I think her willingness to put up with me has been impressive, especially with all the trips and all the stuff that I've done. We have traveled a lot together to a lot of these places. We spent a month in Burma by ourselves. And so we have a lot of shared experiences. You heard around the house a lot of the stuff she knew about, and she knew what had happened. I wrote I don't know if I told you, I wrote a book, Donde no hay doctor. There's a book called Donde no hay doctor, where there is no doctor. And I wrote the Spanish language section. I'd totally forgotten about that. She reminded me in doing an interview that I had written the Spanish section, and that book has been translated into 30 different languages.
You're kidding.
No. And I did it years ago.
Wow.
40 years ago. And, that kind of stuff I had forgotten. She'll remind me of stuff because her memory is better than mine. We both have the same problem now at our age with word recall. What was the name of that guy? But I think she's I have to tell you, she's an impressive woman for 2 big reasons. One, she's married to me, and one, I'm married to her.
It also sounds like, just from not just this conversation, but the conversation before that, there is a strong sense of humor between the two of you. Is that important?
Yeah, there is. I guess, it's an interesting point. The fact that she still laughs at my jokes is probably why we're still married.
And so you also talked about your son, Jason. Mm-hmm. So can you just talk through what was it like becoming a father, and what has fatherhood meant to you in your life?
The thing I remember first of all, he was very, very bright. He worked for Hewlett-Packard for 35 years. They sent him all over the world to upgrade their printer systems and stuff. So and I retired at 75 from active medicine. Didn't want to, but the hospital and I had a disagreement over how to take care of kids. He retired at 56. I said, God damn it, what are you doing retiring at this age? Go to work. But he retired from Hewlett-Packard, and he's very bright. One thing that I remember very, very clearly, something happened in that hallway down there, and he didn't do something, I gave him a swat on the bottom. I don't think I'd ever hit him before.
This is when he was younger?
He was like 2 years old, 3 years old. Gave him a swat on the bottom. I said, go to your room. So he went up, started up the stairs, and at the first landing of the stairs, he said, that didn't hurt anyway. And I had this instantaneous thing, well, let me show you what. I said, oh my God, that's where child abuse comes from. I'd never struck him before, and I never did after that. What struck me is the fact that I had this feeling, well, then let me show you something that does hurt. And I said, you know what? We have to look at ourselves.
And how important you realized how it can start, but where you decided to stop.
Right, so that was important. I took him to Machu Picchu with me one time. He went all the way to Cusco, and we made a job description for him. He was supposed to pick up kids and bring him in. What he did is he and his friend went out and got food for us at the hospital so that we could have something to eat in Cusco.
Oh, nice.
Took him to Machu Picchu, and so he's very bright. He's retired. He's an engineer. I wanted him to be a doctor, and he said he wanted to be a mechanical engineer. I said, well, you could live up in Tahoe and be an orthopedist and fix bones and then ski in the afternoons. What's different than that? That's an engineering. So he became a mechanical engineer. He went to Dartmouth, which was the most expensive school he could find on the East Coast, I think, but they had a ski slope.
Very nice.
And then he went to Stanford for his master's. He got his master's at Stanford, and then Hewlett-Packard hired him before he even graduated.
Wow. And
took him up to their R&D facility, and I said, Jason, why don't you work down here? They have HP down here, Hewlett-Packard down here. He said, Dad, I work in the R&D. He said, Jason, why don't you work down here at Cupertino? I said, Dad, I work R&D. It took me a while to figure out what R&D was.
Transitioning now a bit to just aging, what has surprised you the most about getting older?
I would feel this on my last trips, on these foreign trips. I'd find that at lunchtime I would eat less and less every lunch. Guess why?
Why?
So damn if I didn't want to take a short nap. And in a hospital where everybody's working their butts off, operating right and left, and you can't find a place to put your feet up and just sleep for 15 minutes. All I wanted was a 15-minute nap. I find getting old, that 15-minute, 20-minute nap in the middle of the day is really nice. And I find when I don't have ability to take it, that I miss it.
Yeah.
Do I need it? I think so, but do I miss it? For sure. So getting old has slowed me down in that sense. It bothers me that I'm not as flexible as I would like to be. On the other hand, it bothers me that I'm more flexible than I would like to be too. So.
What habits or mindsets have helped you stay grounded throughout everything you've seen, particularly as you're aging?
Number one, my wife. Number two, I think you have to have a strong sense of self. You have to, I believe in myself. I think I may be wrong in a lot of things that I believe in myself for, but I have belief that I can do it, that I've done it. I mean, what we're talking about, I've done all those. None of them, it's going to sound weird, maybe not, self-serving, maybe so. None of them sound particularly outstanding. None of them sound particularly courageous, brave, accomplishment. But I've done them. But I'm not so sure there were that much. I don't know how to explain that. I mean,
it sounds like humility.
Well, okay.
Because I can tell you that what you've done sounds incredible. Truly,
yeah, but from my perspective, it was things fell my way. Much of the time, the roll of the dice was in my favor. It's not that I was able to manipulate the dice; it's that it just happened, and I took advantage of the fact that it happened.
So, when you look back at your life, what makes you the most proud?
Probably my medical career and everything that's gone with it. If I hadn't had medicine, I can't imagine a life that I wouldn't have had medicine in my life. It's been such a powerful influence, and my consciousness, when I retired, one of the first things I felt, it was Friday and I was going to retire that day. I said, I'm not thinking of what I'm doing Monday, who I have to check on Monday, what lab hasn't been done, who's got an x-ray that I got to watch for. The lack of future thought in retirement is actually sort of good too.
Well, what were the turning points that shaped your life the most? If you can pick any one or two out.
Medical school, number one. I think quitting West Point was such a, it wasn't difficult to do, but it was a big step. Just because who quits West Point? I mean, the minute they said, okay, we're going to let you out, I got isolated from the Corps. I ate by myself. I lived by myself for the week that they drummed me out. And I said, you know what? They're afraid I'll contaminate somebody. I went to breakfast by myself. I went to lunch by myself during that time.
And you're young. This was a tough decision at a young age.
And because I was under 21, I couldn't decide that by myself. I needed parental permission to resign. And my father said, no, you're at West Point. Nobody from our town has ever gone to West Point, ever. I said, Dad, I'm going to tell him tonight that I shaved. Tomorrow I'm going to tell him I didn't shave. I'm going to be thrown out in 1 hour. I'll be gone. All I have to do is tell a lie. I didn't want to go out that way, but I'm not opposed to it.
Sure.
He said, permission granted. So I think quitting West Point was a turning point. Going to Berkeley was another one, and then medical school. I think it all had to do with education.
Yeah.
Mostly education.
What advice do you think young people need to hear today?
If you're 18, don't let your age stop you. If you're 85, don't let your age stop you. Do what you think is right, regardless of how old you are.
What do you hope people remember about you?
That I was here, that I lived once, and hopefully people can learn from me, and I can learn from them. But that's about it. I don't have a lot of ego. I do have a lot of ego, actually.
Okay, this is just the last section. This is like quick, what comes to mind quick, so you could call it a lightning round or whatever. What's a small joy that you never get tired of?
Breakfast, my nap.
Any specific type of breakfast or just breakfast in general?
Breakfast in general, which I usually prepare, by the way, but that's a different story.
What was your favorite decade and why?
Probably my medical school and training. When I was in medical school, and then the 4 years I spent in training.
Because you enjoyed the work, you enjoyed the experience?
Because I enjoyed the work, because I enjoyed the experience, and because it seemed like every day there was something new to learn. And if you didn't learn it the day before, you had a chance to do it again with a slight different twist.
What's a piece of advice someone gave you that you never forget?
Don't take Ambien more than 3 days in a row? No. Piece of advice that I never forgot. Learn your right from your left, and I still don't know it.
So holding that rock in West Point?
Didn't do any good. All I know is rock. And then he said right or left, that was it. That was done.
The funniest or most mischievous thing you ever did when you were younger?
Probably when I was a shoe shine boy and I was a small kid. How much for shine shoes? 50 cents? Fine. Shine one shoe. I'm sorry, sir. I meant 50 cents per shoe.
Did that work a few times?
A few times it did. The tip would work. The guy would say, no, it's still 50 cents for both, but I'll give you $1 as 50 cents as a tip. That was fine.
One thing you wish everyone valued more?
Themselves and others, really. But I'm not sure you can value others until you value yourself.
If you could relive one day, not to change it, but just to feel it again, which day would it be?
Not to change it, my wedding day.
Can you describe it just a bit?
We were married in the City Hall in San Francisco. We had to wait our time in line.
Seniors at Berkeley.
Seniors in Berkeley. And we started being rambunctious. And the judge said, "This is a serious matter." And we got up, and after he finished with some court case, he married us right in front of the bench, and it was strange, but it was the start of a strange life.
Amazing. Thank you so much to you, Paul, for sharing your life story and your perspective. I can't thank you enough. And I hope you all enjoyed the interview. Please be sure to like and subscribe. And thank you so much. I really sincerely appreciate your time.
Not a problem. It was sort of fun.
Okay, good.